So hello and welcome to Splitting the Veil podcast. My name is Jordan. I have a YouTube channel called The Exalted March.
I'm Caitie. I do Ghildirthalen.
And as you can probably tell by the title of this is not going to be a typical episode. This is kind of going to be a short episode to talk about the controversy, the explosion of PR nightmare that is Battlefront 2, loot boxes, microtransactions, and EA's response to that, basically to get everybody caught up on it. If you're not aware, if you're a Reddit user, you're probably aware because it's one of the most hilarious and wonderful things that's ever happened on Reddit. I was delighted. Like, even if I didn't have a podcast where I talk about Bioware / EA and a YouTube channel, like, this would have just been hilarious. I've been talking about this with my friends. I just find it hilarious because EA screwed up so bad. Basically what happened is someone started a thread on Reddit lamenting the fact that even though they paid $79.99 for Battlefront 2 Special Edition, etc., major iconic Star Wars characters like Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker are still behind a paywall unless you grind like an incredible amount through normal gameplay matches to unlock them, basically, right? The most prudent way to get to play as some of the most iconic Star Wars characters in Battlefront 2, a game about playing iconic Star Wars characters, is to pay extra money. So someone started that thread, and then the origin of all of it really is an EA representative, a PR person for EA who manages one of their Reddit accounts, left a comment to try and respond to this criticism. And I won't go through and read the entire comment itself. It's been memed to death at this point. I'm sure there's people on Reddit who have it memorized, but the essential problem with it is that it read incredibly tone deaf. It read as someone who is trying to justify action that is clearly not consumer friendly, that is not friendly to people who play the game without buying microtransactions. And I think what probably frustrated people the most is it just sort of sounded like, shut up, this is good for you, and we know what you want more than you do, so just grind for a bunch of characters that you should have had when the game came out, or pay for them, and that's what's best for you. So that started to upset people, and that comment has now garnered 674,000 downvotes as of this recording, which is far and away the most downvoted comment in Reddit history.
If you actually see graphs of it, it is way, which I at the time when it first getting a lot of traction, it was like just a bunch of like random comments everywhere, and then this EA comment, which was huge up there, and it kept growing and growing and growing. And then as time went on, EA, I guess, started freaking out. So now I think like of the top 10 most downvoted comments, I think 7 belong to EA just from this controversy alone. Like, also real quick, the comment itself, I just love this fact so much, so I have to share it. It's been gilded, so that means someone has paid. How much is it? Like $5
it's like a few
or something?
bucks, yeah.
Yeah, like to Reddit, to like put a little icon in there, and is Reddit gold. And it has been, people have done this 89 times. They have 22 years. If 1 equals 3 months, I don't know if that's perfect. That's 22 years of Reddit gold that this comment has been given. Who's paying for this? Why?
That was a weird little trivia thing at first, because if someone who's listening to this is not a Reddit user, I know a lot of our listeners are, but if anyone's not a Reddit user, you normally gild a comment that's like an incredible comment, something you really, really appreciated, something really articulate or meaningful that someone said.
Or just funny, you know?
Or funny, that's true. Also, a lot of shit posts are so good, they end up getting gilded. But you normally do it for a comment that you like, and I think the explanation for this was continuing to gild it keeps it at the top of the thread.
Oh.
And so that's why so many people kept doing it for some reason.
That's interesting. I haven't heard that side. Well, that makes a little bit more sense, but still, like, so if someone wanted to keep this at the top of the thread, there's 89 people who wanted to keep this at the top so bad they paid like money for it. Anyway.
So that's the basic controversy, or as I like to say, controversy. And I think it speaks to much larger implications that have been coming out in the gaming industry, which is whether or not microtransactions are becoming a dominant form of generating revenue for these companies. The simple fact is that although a majority of us do not like them, from a cost per user standpoint, most of these companies recognize the tremendous benefit in like a super user coming around. Where it's like you have someone who boycotts you have many people say, you have a bunch of people who boycott a game because they don't like the idea of microtransactions, but all of those people represent $59.99 as far as like revenue generated off of that title, whereas one ridiculous person who has a lot of disposable income and loves microtransactions spends $1,000 in your game, and all of a sudden they cancel out what typically would have been the predominant force economically, which is the largest number of people. You give a super user the ability to generate a lot of revenue under one title. So that's concerning for people, because that is economically, it gives publishers great incentive to continue doing this. And this instance with Battlefront 2, I think, represents what people were afraid of, which is it's going to get so bad, publishers aren't going to care how angry people are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, it's this controversy has gotten so big, like it didn't, like Disney said something, there's now laws being made or something. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yes. So it started off as just like petitions and your normal like internet rage that was fomenting. It got bigger and it got real for me in two specific instances. One is Belgium. The country of Belgium has started to consider whether or not having loot boxes specifically. And I guess everyone's probably familiar with this either by playing Mass Effect 3, because that had loot boxes in its multiplayer, or if you play Star Wars The Old Republic, which I had for a long time, they have loot boxes as some of the things you can buy. Basically, it's just you pay for a package of in-game items and you don't know what you're going to get. You might get a super rare item. You mainly get a bunch of common items. And you can pay for the more expensive ones, which have a higher likelihood of having rare items, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. But essentially, certain legislative bodies, like in Belgium, have considered the fact that perhaps this is actually a form of gambling, because you're able to pay real-world money and you don't know what you're going to get. And in particular, in cases like SWTOR, even though it's technically against the rules and it is a bannable offense, people find ways to get around paying real-world money directly to other players for rare items. So people do sell items in SWTOR for real money, and you send it to another player who pays you through PayPal or something. You're not supposed to, but people do it. So, Belgium is considering whether or not it's gambling, and the state of Hawaii in the U.S., one of their state representatives actually held a press conference the other day talking about whether or not what EA is doing is marketing gambling to children. And I thought it was really quite clever. This particular person, I don't know who the representative's name is, but I thought that they were very... politicians have a way with words, right? And so this one state representative, I thought, really stuck it to EA and to Disney and said, basically they said something to the effect of, Joe Camel, the cartoon character for Camel cigarettes, was not allowed to market cigarettes to kids in the 90s. Why should Star Wars and Disney be able to market gambling to kids now? And I was like,
real quick, I looked up his name. His name is Chris Lee.
That's what it was.
He's a Democrat
Chris
from
Lee.
Hawaii.
So I want to give Chris Lee, state representative from Hawaii, credit, because that is a damning statement. I mean, it's a bit of an overstatement in the way that politicians normally do. It's kind of like rabble-rousing, but goddamn, if you're Disney, you have to pay attention to someone saying something like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And now, from what I was reading when we were doing some research on this, the response that we have so far heard from Disney is apparently Disney contacted EA and was like, we're not liking what's going on right now. And EA has since pulled the microtransactions, right? I don't know anything about Battlefront. I keep calling it Battlefield. I don't know anything about this.
Well, we were joking before we started recording, like, as far as EA is concerned, it basically is Battlefield. It's just Battlefield Star Wars. Mm-hmm. And then also, like, I guess, right, full disclosure, I did play Battlefront. It starts to get confusing, like I said pre-show. Battlefront 1 and 2 that were on the original PlayStation and Xbox were great games. They're like all-time great games. I played the crap out of both of those, but we're not really talking about those. So yeah. So just as a caveat, when I say Battlefront 1, I don't mean the originals. I mean the Battlefront that came out for the next-gen consoles a couple years ago, like 2015. I played that. I found that it was okay. I felt that it was a little bit grindy and kind of relied on microtransactions too much. The maps were pretty small, etc. Wasn't my favorite game. I thought it got boring quickly without a campaign. Mm-hmm. But in the interest of full disclosure, I haven't played Battlefront 2. Right, so you're saying you haven't either. So as to the merits of whether or not it's a good game, I'm sure it's probably got some redeeming values and it's fun, but the progression system being what it is, either dependent on grinding or microtransactions, I imagine that's going to be super frustrating. Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, you were pointing out that Bob Iger, CEO of Disney, according to the Wall Street Journal, had reached out to some of the executive leadership at EA and brought up this topic and what the negative publicity was looking like. And it's not really clear from the reporting that's been done whether or not it was like a direct mandate that they needed to change their direction. But, you know, when Bob Iger, the CEO of Disney, which is arguably the biggest entertainment company on the planet, maybe ever in the history of human civilization, if Bob Iger gives you a call that says maybe you should change something, it's like, what's the old story about, like, who will rid me of this meddlesome priest kind of a thing? It's like, it means, like, you do it. It's not really a question. It's like, yeah, you should probably do it. So, yeah, EA backed down pretty quickly, I believe, and said that they were removing the microtransactions, at least for the time being. So maybe that's a victory. I know I saw something, there was a thread on Reddit of someone who said that according to what they had been able to put together, that some of the XP earning had also been retabulated when the microtransactions were turned off in such a way where it sort of canceled out. I don't have that spreadsheet that they put together, but I remember looking over it briefly, and from what it looked like, it was like, yeah, microtransactions got turned off, but the ability to grind in order to unlock some of this stuff, you have to grind even more. So it kind of looked like a little sleight of hand on the part of EA, like they kind of caved into the pressure, but it's still not a gameplay-centric. It's not feasible to just play the game and unlock this stuff in a normal fashion. You're going to have to devote an exorbitant amount of time to it.
What I don't get is why is, like, everyone was making a big stink, particularly that you couldn't play, like, you know, the Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker, all of them. Like, why not just give it to him? Like, why make it so hard to begin with? It's not like it's it's something. It's not like an actual item where they only have so many of it that they can hand out. Like, you can actually, like, just do it. Like, is there a balance issue? Is that what they're worried about? Or what? No, I don't. See, and I think that's one of the things that's most frustrating for people is that there really is no design reason to do it. Like you said, a balance issue. I think what it is it's mainly if grinding is unappealing, which they're trying to pretend that it's not. They're trying to pretend that it is appealing. That's what the real ire was about that one comment on Reddit, is that they claimed that they were making it this way because it's more satisfying, essentially, to grind for hours and hours to unlock something. But I think the real clear strategy is that grinding's not appealing. People don't want to do it. And so it's like a negative, positive push-pull. If grinding is unappealing, that makes buying something more enticing. Okay, so they make the thing you want really far away so you play the game more, is essentially what it is.
Yes.
Is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, the longer you play the game, the more likely you are to buy something. But if you're also grinding to try and unlock Darth Vader, which is like one of the highest things to unlock, at some point you're going to start to be like, $5.99 is not that bad. I'll just pay to unlock that thing. Okay. I can see this coming out of, I don't remember if this was on air or not, because we talked a bit about this beforehand, but you mentioned that Battlefield, the newer first one that came out a couple years ago, Battlefront.
It sounded like you had to drop off pretty quickly after it released. And like from what I remember of it, like everyone was so hyped up for it, and then it came out and everyone's like, and then it got forgotten about quickly. Is this perhaps a reaction to that, where they try to make it like, oh, well, if you play a lot, then you'll get that Darth Vader? And it's trying to help stop the really sudden drop-off that everyone just got bored with. Do you think...
I think essentially yes. I think because I think the problem with the Battlefront that came out in 2015 was that there wasn't enough content, essentially. I think what they're struggling with is how do we provide a lot of content while still keeping our margins relatively high, right? Because all of it takes time and resources to put into production. And so it's like, how do we add all this content while still making the game cost effective? And I guess what they figured out was we'll make people pay for all the additional content. That is clearly kind of blown up in their face, though.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, it was just like, how greedy do you have to get? I mean, Star Wars is a license to print money. Like, I don't know what their numbers are. I don't know how much this game costs, to put into production. I feel like it's got a short campaign and it's mostly multiplayer driven. The Frostbite engine is in place. I mean, every game that you build is going to need some modifications to the engine, but it's a first-person shooter. That's what Frostbite is built for. I kind of feel like this is a ready-made game, not to diminish the amount of work that the developers have to do to create a game, but it's just like, how much do you have to skimp to get massive profits on a goddamn Star Wars title? You're releasing a month before one of the most anticipated films of all time. Like, you should be able to make crazy amounts of profits off this game no matter what.
That makes me wonder if, like, because you're way more business minded than I am, and like my husband is too, and like we were talking about it, and like we both were saying, like, I feel like we're missing something, like maybe like, I don't know, I just feel like I'm missing something like businesses don't do things that are 100% stupid all the time. There is some kernel of logic there. It might be wrong, but like there is some argument of like why they did it, and I can't come up with one for this situation, and I wonder what we're missing. What makes them do this? What makes them is it just cheaper? And like, so it's more like, it's really not about the game. It's about the printing money. And like, even if this game does terribly because they didn't spend a lot of money making it, no matter what they make, they're probably going to make a profit. Is that what this was?
Yes. And actually you bring up a great question. You're 100% right for thinking that. And this is something I've thought about, and I think I have the answer. I could make a video about it if I wasn't so lazy about making videos. But since I'm already on the mic, and this is where most of my content comes out now, is in the podcast. You're right. There is a reason for this, and what actually people should realize is that, with exceptions, essentially businesses never make stupid decisions. And I'm going to back off of that statement because I know people are going to get mad at me. Obviously, businesses do stupid things, but if I was inside of EA and I worked for EA and I was advising them and I saw all of their numbers and I saw all of their finances, big businesses in particular, businesses that are big and that stay big, despite the fact that people hate them, like Electronic Arts. People have hated them for decades. Like Comcast, like a lot of these, AT&T and a lot of these other companies that people hate, they almost never make the stupidest decision. Or they never continually make the stupidest decision. Not for themselves. They'll make decisions that are very anti-consumer that we don't like, but normally they will make the best of multiple bad choices. So in this case, I think the reason why EA is doing this is because they rely very heavily on their licensed titles. That is essentially what they garner most of their profit and most of their revenue from. So much so that it's not enough for them to just make lots of profit on Madden and FIFA and Star Wars. They have to make uber profit, because Andromeda didn't do very well. And even when numbers come in over what was projected for, say, something like Inquisition, that's a small slice of what they were doing. If you go through their earnings reports, which I do, and if you listen to their calls, which I do because I find that stuff interesting, you'll note some of the language that they use around high-performing games. Like when Inquisition won Game of the Year and it did well, it's with a certain amount of surprise that they talk about it. They're very happy that it comes in over expectations, and they love to talk about what a good thing that is, but you can tell that they never plan for their original IPs to do very well. The same thing happened with oh crap, now I'm freezing on the mech game, the first person shooter they have from Respawn Entertainment.
Oh fuck. Titanfall? No.
Titanfall 2. Yeah. So the one that came out, that did much better than they expected. And so that it seems like the way that EA sets up their earnings expectations are Madden and FIFA, because those are very worldwide and they're annual, and then Star Wars, because Star Wars games have been hit or miss. Like Madden and FIFA, you bank on all the time. That's why they're becoming super microtransaction-y, because that's where they make their money. But their other original IP titles are kind of up and down, and so essentially they have to be greedy. If I were kind of quote unquote taking their side for a minute or playing devil's advocate, the reason why they do this is because they have to make so much money on the licensed titles. Also because you pay for these licenses. Like they pay the NFL money to be the only people that are allowed to make NFL games. Like they paid for the Star Wars license, and they have to recoup an enormous amount of cost for that. So they have to essentially not just make profit, but make uber profit on every single thing that is a licensed game. And so I think that's where some of this attitude comes from, where we're all sort of like aghast and like, how greedy do you have to be in order to just make, profitable profit? And it's like, well, they can't just make normal profit. They can't even make big profit. They have to make uber profit on all the licensed titles.
That's super interesting to think about. I guess a question that came up in my mind that you mentioned, maybe I misunderstood, but I heard somewhere in there that because Mass Effect Andromeda didn't do great, that it there also has to be, now Battlefront 2 has to make even more money. So is Mass Effect Andromeda's failure, is this also fueling some of the what we're seeing here with the microtransactions? Yes, no?
Probably not directly, because the decisions about what they were going to do as microtransactions in Battlefront were probably well ahead of time. Mm-hmm. I think it's more just the idea that they don't ever expect the non-licensed titles to do that well, except for maybe Battlefield. Battlefield's probably the only non-licensed one that they expect to do somewhat well, but I think they have low expectations for their RPGs, right? Basically the Bioware games, like that's what makes Bioware fans so nervous, is that EA doesn't need Bioware by any stretch of the imagination. So when people talk about like, is Bioware going to be another studio that EA has killed? Like, that's not just paranoia. I mean, Bioware is a small part of their portfolio, and if a couple of games in a row lose money, and then especially something like Dragon Age, which doesn't have any real avenue for... Oh, no, wait. Dragon Age Inquisition had multiplayer, and they had loot boxes also, right?
Yeah, they did. I didn't play much of it, but yeah.
I didn't touch it, yeah. So, okay, so they've kind of got loot boxes in Inquisition, but...
Yeah.
I think it's more just the idea that they expect very little from their role-playing games or from their original IPs. And so, like I said, they bank so much on those licensed titles making tons of money. But I think it's not so much that Andromeda quote-unquote failed financially or came in under expectations. I think it's that even if it met expectations or surpassed expectations, it still represents a small part of their portfolio.
Okay. Which, like, I know... One thing I always try to do, if I have a voice in the Dragon Age community, I want to, like, keep the paranoia down. But, like, I feel like people who are worried of EA shutting Bioware down, like, I'm not personally seeing signs of that, but I guess what I'm hearing from you, like, it is a possibility. Like, it's not ruled out completely.
It's certainly a possibility, but you're right. I guess in the state of paranoia, it's like... Is it likely, or is it any time in the near future? Absolutely not. Dragon Age has really not missed very often. It's certainly not missed.
I guess out of 3 games, 1 did bad, but like the other 2 were great. So. Yeah,
and like Inquisition, I think was the most profitable Bioware game ever. I think is what I recall. And if EA is being, how do I put this? They should be somewhat rational enough to realize that the stipulations that they put on BioWare around Dragon Age 2, like EA asks for a quick turnaround time on a Dragon Age game. Mm-hmm. That was what the story was, from what I recall, is that EA wanted a Dragon Age game turned around quickly, and that's what BioWare gave them, and that was Dragon Age 2. So if there's any type of logic in the upper leadership of EA, they should kind of give BioWare a pass financially for Dragon Age 2. Like, hey, we asked for something done in a year and a half. This is what you gave us, and it wasn't that great, but that's what you get in a year and a half. So yeah, I don't think it's at all likely that EA would shut down BioWare, but I would say if there are 2 or 3 misses in a row, somebody at EA is going to start bringing up the question.
So essentially, if Anthem tanks, which now we talk about Anthem...
If Anthem, like this is hypothetically, if DA4 and Anthem come in under expectations, you better believe that that's going to be a question raised. I'm not saying it's happening, but I would be shocked if they weren't, especially if you're trying to pivot BioWare to more of a multiplayer, like peer-based shooter, and then you're going, oh crap, the RPG stuff is limited by the fact that we don't think that there's a high enough potential market for this. There's only a certain, like Skyrim is as high as you can get anyway. Let's try and pivot them to also do this more of like this peer-based shooter thing. And then if you figure out that doesn't work, somebody at EA is going to start saying, what is the point of BioWare? Like, why do we keep them in the portfolio? But that's far down the road. I think DA is going to be a success. And if Anthem is also a success, then there's nothing to worry about.
But the question is that now with all this loot box stuff, how's Anthem going to do? Because, like, I've seen a couple posts already on Reddit saying, like, let's boycott Anthem. Which, like, granted, they have every right to, and maybe there's even a reason to. But we know nothing about the game yet. And, like, probably there are going to be loot boxes in there. But, like, is it, like, I've seen... doesn't Destiny have loot boxes? Or no, I know I have Destiny 2 and I play like an hour of it before I'm like, oh man, I really hate shooters. I forgot about that.
I haven't played Destiny 2 yet. I played a bit of Destiny. Destiny has random loot, but do they have paid? I don't think they do, or at least I never bought any.
I don't know.
I don't think that.
Let's fucking Google it. We can do this. We have computers.
We have the internet. While you're Googling, I do just, because I think we'll kind of go into, you had a thought about whether or not it could affect the DA4 release cycle, and then we had some other things to talk about as far as Anthem, but I do just want to put a pin in the legislative aspect of it, because we talked about this pre-show. We did want to mention, I brought up that Belgium was considering whether or not loot boxes should legally be considered gambling, and we did see an article that was stating that the UK Commission on Gambling had determined that loot boxes are not considered gambling. Mm-hmm. So at least initially, some of the things that have been examined by certain governmental bodies, it's been determined that, you know, maybe that's not something that legally should be determined gambling. That should be said, I guess, in EA's favor. That, you know, it probably comes close, but at least the UK Gambling Commission doesn't think it's gambling.
Real quick, so they don't have loot boxes, but you can buy, like, in-game currency, it looks like. So for $50, you can buy 5,800 silver. That's a weird amount. But, so yeah, the conversion rate is 1 bright Ingram for 200. So I'm reading a Polygon. I got Destiny 2 for free when I bought my computer, and, like, I tried to play it, and I'm just not, like, into it. So, like, even though, like, I have, because I played a little bit of it, I have a vague idea what's going on, but not enough to express this, unfortunately. But point is, there are microtransactions. So, but the thing is, Destiny 2 has been huge, and we haven't heard of any problems with its whatever silver thing that they do. So, perhaps is this the way Anthem should go, is the more Destiny route, which it's sort of being compared to Destiny, or is it going to be... See, I don't remember the trailer very well. Did they say they were going to have loot boxes like Star Wars does, or were they going to... Did they even say anything about it?
I don't know. They've certainly not said anything official. I want to say, and we should take this with a huge grain of salt because I'm not remembering correctly. I want to say that the creative director of Anthem, in one of, like, the many E3 interviews they do, I was watching it on a live stream. That's why I couldn't pull it up if I wanted to, but he said something to the effect of, like, the equipment or progression system was going to be similar to how it was in, like, other EA games. So I'm thinking they probably will have loot boxes, or at least they would have been planning to. But after this controversy, they're certainly considering it. They have to be considering taking it out.
Yeah, or at least changing it a lot.
I don't know. I just feel like altogether, as a fan of Bioware, like, it's not the old Bioware games where you just played a game for 40 or 50 hours and you unlocked cool gear in your single player RPG. Like, now it's tied into online progression systems, and it's just, I don't know. I don't dig it.
Yeah. Like, as much as I like Bioware stuff, Anthem's gonna have to pull out a lot of stuff for me to, like, 1, buy it, and then 2, like, even enjoy it. Because, like, I don't like shooters. Like, I guess my fear for Anthem is that a lot of Bioware fans are really in it for the RPG elements. No one's really in it for the shooters. So what's going to happen when Anthem comes out? Like, is it just going to attract a whole new audience? And if that's it, like, is this game mode, like, people are saying it's a Destiny clone kind of thing. We don't know much about it, but if it is, then, like, why would people choose Anthem over just Destiny 2 or whatever? The people who are loyal to Bioware, wouldn't they just say, like, well, I'll try it, but I'm not really into it. So even if they do buy the game, like, they're going to play, like, maybe a couple hours of it and go, like, not for me. So I don't know. Like, I guess I'm worried for Anthem, if that makes sense. Like, I really have no stake in it, whatever. If it affects Dragon Age 4, I'll be sad, but, like, my life will go on. I have a life outside of Bioware games.
Exactly.
But like, I don't know. Like, I I'm glad that they're stepping out of their comfort zone, and I hope it works out for them or whatever, but, like, I have trouble seeing this doing extremely well, to be honest. I don't know. Like, it just doesn't seem like something that... Like, I feel like Anthem is what EA wants Bioware to do. You know?
I agree with that. I think it's also EA trying to chase a trend. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, how well can this peer-based online shooter really do? I mean, at this point, The Division didn't do very well. The Ghost Recon game didn't do very well, so Ubisoft hasn't had great success with it. The biggest success that has been seen so far is Destiny and Destiny 2, and that's not that successful. It's a little underwhelming. Mm-hmm. So it's like EA is chasing a trend, quote unquote, but it's a trend that's not doing that well, at least as far as what we know. And then what are the chances that that a company that's traditionally been an RPG developer is going to do it better than Bungie, who's been a shooter company for 25 freaking years?
Yeah. It's like, I think the only way this can work is somehow, and I don't even know how they would do it, somehow they mash in that shooter element with some great RPG elements. And like, I feel like they tried to almost hint at this and like, oh, there's going to be a story and like, you know, customization and all blah, blah, blah. And like the fact that Bioware, that's their bread and butter. I think the only way to make this fresh and new is that if they really like hammer in like a Dragon Age-esque, a Mass Effect-esque story onto the shooter where it's actually a good story and not just, I don't know anything about Destiny, but I hear it has a shit story. And when I played like 1 hour of it, like, wow, I'm already bored. Like, but I think that's the only way it could kind of do well is just taking a new twist onto it. And even then, I don't know, it's going to do like awesome, you know, like, not everyone likes RPGs. The people who like RPGs and people who are like shooters are different people. If they have a weird one in the middle, like there's going to be some people from both sides going, oh, this is interesting. But people who are really into RPGs don't want to play the shooter element. And people who are in the shooter element don't want to play the RPG. Like it's who got my chocolate and my peanut butter? You know, like...
No, I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head where you're like, you don't know much about Destiny, but you know enough about Destiny to fix Destiny, basically, which is just like, the story really wasn't very good. And you're 100% correct, which is like, if you're trying to enter into this market where it is kind of like a hot trend in gaming right now, which is to try and do open world, peer-based, loot-based, something rather shooter, the one big area of opportunity is a great story. And that is, you know, to EA's credit, you happen to have a studio that is perfectly positioned to deliver a meaningful story in a video game. So I can see why they're doing it. But you're right. Really, the only way for Anthem to distinguish itself amongst all of the other squad peer shooters is to have a great story.
Now, I think moving on from this, something that I've seen expressed on the Dragon Age subreddit is, how is this going to affect Dragon Age 4 and its type of thing? So my hypothesis, I wrote a small comment on it on the Reddit, and you can find it somewhere. But my hypothesis was, so right now Battlefront not doing too hot. I can see them doing releasing a trailer for Dragon Age 4 earlier than that would be expected before this thing blew up in their faces, to try to drum up some positive support for BioWare, because everyone's saying like, well, Anthem's going to have this microtransaction, let's, you know, downvote it, whatever. So I could see them doing that. At the same time, like, if they do that, is it going to be too early in Dragon Age 4's development cycle and therefore actually make things worse? Or are they just going to leave things how it is and hope that some other gaming company fucks up royally before Anthem comes out and cross their fingers? Like, I don't know. Or maybe they're just hoping it gets swept under the rug. Are they even not going to have loot boxes so it's a non-issue? Like, I don't know. It's going to be interesting how things play out in the next couple months, I think.
It is going to be interesting. I think what I kind of have always liked is that, I don't know, I guess the easiest way to put it is Dragon Age kind of seems to be in its own world, so to speak. Like, I kind of feel like EA has messed with Dragon Age the least. Like, I feel like EA messed with Mass Effect more. They wanted more multiplayer. I think they tried to turn Mass Effect into what they're ultimately going for with Anthem. I think they saw some potential for that, whereas Dragon Age kind of seems to be left alone. I don't think that they would rush DA4 necessarily as a way to fix anything related to related to this Battlefront controversy. I selfishly would like for them to release a trailer early. I mean, yeah, if they want to do that, I'd love a trailer for DA4, totally. I mean, one thing worth noting too is that apparently in the latest quarterly earnings report from EA, there was a statement from EA saying, and this is basically the quote, is that, quote, "This change is not expected to have a material impact on EA's fiscal year 2018 financial guidance." That change that's being referenced is the change to kind of turn off microtransactions for Battlefront 2. So a lot of people, I kind of take issue with how some people read that. Some people read that as saying, oh, apparently turning off microtransactions doesn't affect their earnings or doesn't have any effect on them. You have to really be careful about how you read that statement when it says it is not expected to have a material impact on EA's fiscal year 2018 financial guidance. Essentially what that means, that translates to, we're not really going to change anything about our plan. That doesn't mean that it doesn't affect them. What it could mean, and I'm not saying that this is what it does mean, but what it could mean is something like, it does affect us, but we don't really have a way to offset it, so we're not adapting a plan, we're just going to let it ride. The reason why they phrase it that way is because it sounds better than saying, we are going to lose money and we have nothing to do about it. Essentially, that's what they could be covering. Or it could, yes, it's true that it could mean we're going to make this change and it's not going to affect us very much, so we don't have to change our planning. But the reason why that statement is phrased the way that it is because it's vague and it's not lying, so they're not violating any of their legal requirements to tell the truth in financial earnings. So when you say something like it's not going to affect our fiscal year 2018 financial guidance, it's like, yeah, well, it's not affecting your planning, but...
It's you are losing money.
Potentially. We don't know, essentially.
Yeah. When will we know? Or will we know?
We will probably know after the next quarterly earnings results come out, and even then it'll be pretty vague. Like, we'll know kind of how Battlefront did, but we won't. They're not going to say whether it was because of the microtransactions or not. We'll just kind of know how it did.
I know nothing about quarterly earnings. When was that expected to pop off?
I don't know off the top of my head. When is the...
Like, can like maybe like it's a month estimate or something like that, or...
Yeah, it should be the early part of next year. So March-ish, February, March, right? I think that's right.
Well, this will be something to talk about in March or whenever it is.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, because we've already kind of talked about Anthem and what we think it's going to imply. We're already getting close to 40 minutes, so...
Yeah. Oh, wow, okay.
Did we have... That was it. Did you have any final thoughts on it?
My only final thoughts is that, like, I can already... Because, like, my channel specifically is more Dragon Age focused, and yours is kind of all the above. I can see more comments in mine going like, oh, God, I'm worried about Dragon Age now. I guess... What at least I've been hearing here, like... Could you worry about this? Yeah. There's probably is something you could worry about. But I think, like, this isn't going to affect Dragon Age 4. It might affect Dragon Age 5. I don't know. But for right now, like, if you're worried about Dragon Age 4, like, at least from what I'm hearing now, like, it's just going to do what it does. It's already it's too deep in its shoes right now.
Exactly.
To be really affected. And, like, maybe the series as a whole might be, you know, not doing so hot, but I also feel like Bioware would know a little bit, like, what's kind of going on behind. They would know better than us what's going on, and if they sense like maybe we don't get a Dragon Age 5, I can see them easily like kind of subtly closing off the story a little bit in a satisfying way. I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, I don't expect Dragon Age to end like Half-Life.
No, yeah. I mean, my thoughts on it for just Dragon Age are just like, Dragon Age 4 is definitely happening, and it's probably definitely, listen to me, I sound like the EA PR person. I would say it's more than likely that DA4 is going to happen in exactly the same way that it would have, even if this Battlefront thing didn't happen. I don't see it really having any effect on DA4 because it's too, like you said, it's too far down the pipeline for what they're already doing. The only way that it could ever affect the Dragon Age franchise is if, again, a couple more games that are original IP games for EA do poorly, and then someone at EA starts to question, should we be doing any of these at all, or should we just exclusively do licensed stuff?
Yeah.
And even that seems highly unlikely because, again, I think DA is probably going to be a major success, and I think Anthem at least has a chance to be a major success. So I wouldn't worry. As a Dragon Age, as I am a huge Dragon Age fan and I can't wait for DA4, this stuff doesn't worry me at all.
I as much as I think we're also saying doom and gloom, I agree with you. I'm not really worried. Like right now, I think if we project ourselves into 2020 and Bioware shut down, everything's dead, whatever, and we could probably say like, oh, this was a stepping stone into the end, so to speak. But I think from our position, it's too hard to tell at this point, and it's really not worrying about. So
right.
This is you're the business guy doing your business thing, and here I am looking, I'm the therapist doing the therapist thing, going, it's okay, guys, don't worry about it, it's all right.
Together, we'll get people through this.
Yeah. You got the analytics that's actually, useful, and I'll just pat everyone on the head and give them crackers and make sure they're warm and fed. There we go.
All right, so I think we've covered this fiasco. We'll have this uploaded fairly soon, and then we've got another episode and more episodes coming of the typical variety. We will either already have uploaded, or we will have very soon coming an episode on the different races in Dragon Age, the Dragon Age franchise.
Yes, and that's a huge thank you to Carrie Carlton, who sent that in for us. And if you have anything that you want us to talk about, please message us on either the YouTube channels. Do you want to say where you are?
Yeah, people can find me on YouTube under the Exalted March.
And you can find me on YouTube at Ghildirthalen. I'm also on Twitter at Ghildirthalen, on Reddit, on Gillanon, or you can email me at ghildirthalen@gmail.com. They're all listed. But just message one of us what you want to know, if you want to say anything at all. And I think with that, do you want to say it this time?
Durath Shiral.
Yeah.